a wonderful grandson. Denise and her husband, Jimmy, own an independent retail pharmacy, Burry's Pharmacy in Leesburg, Florida. In 2017, Denise was awarded the Mayor's Award by the City of Leesburg and the Humanitarian Award by the Leesburg Chamber of Commerce. In 2018, the Leesburg Partnership presented her with the Community Service Award, and in 2019, she was awarded the Anna H. Settles Leadership Award at the Altrusa International Convention in Reno, Nevada. Altrusa, by the way, is a service club with an impressive history. You can find out more about them at altrusa.com. Currently, Denise serves as the chair for the Salvation Army's Senior Housing and Homeless Committee for Lake and Sumter County. It is our privilege to have her here as our speaker tonight. Denise?
Thank you. I'm so honored to be here. I'm going to start my talk. I'm going to start with a few statistics. And when I come to a term, sometimes we get used to a certain lingo. I'll try to explain what that term means. So the National Conference of State Legislators report that we have 4.2 million homeless youth that experience homelessness in a year. 700,000 of those are unaccompanied minors. And what that means is they are not with their parents or part of an active family. That means on any given night, 41,000 youth ages 13 to 25 experience homelessness. That's 1 in 10 young adults, 18 to 25, or 1 in 30 adolescents, 13 to 17. 69% of these youth report having mental health issues. 50% of these youth have been involved in our judicial system, either in jail or detention centers. And as many as 40% of these youth are LGBT. Of those LGBT youth, 62% report being abused physically. Of the non-LGBT youth, 42% report being abused physically. Why is this important? This is important because we started Forward Paths to help our at-risk youth. And we find that 90% of the homeless unaccompanied youth have had a stint in foster care. So they may not age out. And we're about 50-50 right now. And it depends on the youth that we're working with, what that percentage is. But it's close to an even split between homeless youth and kids that have aged out foster care. So it all becomes like we're talking about the same population. We're talking about kids that have faced abuse and neglect. So to the point where they have become separated from their family. For me, my experience with homeless youth began as a GAL, a guardian ad litem. And for those of you who don't know what a guardian ad litem is, that's somebody who advocates for a child's best interest in our dependency court system. So after adopting our 2 children, I had 2 people come up to me the same day and say, "You'd be a great guardian ad litem." And I had no idea what that was. And I went to my mother-in-law and she explained. And we had just adopted our daughter, and I thought, maybe I would have got her home sooner if I would have had somebody advocating for her to be with us. So I signed up to do it, and I did it with a passion. And my first guardian kid was a 13-year-old girl. And you know, you're so worried about the day-to-day decisions and what's going on there. And I really had no idea what it meant to age out. And nobody wants to plan for kids to age out and to be on their own. So that was more than 7 years ago. And there's been a lot of changes, but not enough for the kids, for people like her, or the ones that are now going through what she did. She had no, so she aged out, and you age out on your 18th birthday. And we do have programs like extended foster care. The problem is we may have programs, and there's the way things are supposed to work and then the way that they work. So this is where we fall short. But aging out meant that she had no family to help her. And if you don't have family to help you, that basically means that you have no connections to your community. So she had been moved 9 times. She did not attend high school, so therefore she did not graduate from high school. She had a son at 16. She had a brief stint with our juvenile justice system. And since her son wasn't in state custody, the courts decided not to get involved with his care, but then later on there would be a case. When she aged out back then, it was road to independence. So she received a stipend of $1,256. She didn't have, like I said, she didn't have her high school diploma. She didn't have a driver's license. She never had a job, never had any money to learn how to budget. So you hand a kid $1,256, but she's supposed to figure out how to get her son to daycare, how to get a job, and how to complete school. So the first department, and this is what made me decide that something needed to change. It's like I couldn't figure out what to tell her to do for what she should do first. She got an apartment. Of course, it was too much for her to afford on the money that she had. And then she didn't have a car. So how do you get everywhere? And it, you know, the path just was a little uncertain. So she decided to go to school. And I was so surprised at the reception that she got, thinking that here's a youth deciding to go back to school. You would think that the carpet's being rolled out for her, and it wasn't that. And it's at that point, it's like, we are going to do something to change this. So there's a Florida statute, 1009.25, that basically says the kids aging out of foster care and the homeless unaccompanied youth are exempt from fees. And that means all tuition and fees, but yet here just recently, we paid $800 for one of our youth to attend cosmetology school at Lake Tech. Now, tell me, how does a kid deal with those issues of how do I get there? How do, you know, where am I living? How am I eating? How do I manage this money? I fell short. Then figure out how to pay $800 in fees. And then we'll get into some of the other things like you need a uniform, but you need a uniform in a specific place. If the youth, like the one that I mentioned, has been involved in our juvenile justice system, Florida does not seal those records. So if a youth has been involved, and many are, you're talking about the separation of a family, they may have a death of a loved one. Youth do not often deal with these without complications, anger, acting out, some attempts to run away, and that's where you get into that the juvenile justice system. So then they're carrying a past with them, and where it stops them is in programs like our CNAs or even daycares, anything that requires a back check. They have them sign a waiver, and oftentimes they're then not allowed to pursue those careers. Where Georgia has a way to seal those records for those students. So then they have to figure out, okay, I want to go to school. What do I do? Another big problem we have in Lake County is transportation. You're talking about a kid, especially if it's a young mother or young father, that may have to figure out how to get to work and school and then daycare. So if they don't have a driver's license and they don't have a GED, they haven't really learned how to be a student. So they're figuring out our education system and the requirements and the demands on that, in addition to where to live, how to get groceries, how to get to work, how to get to school, how to get to daycare. It all becomes very, very complicated. If you live in Leesburg, just to give you an example, Lake Tech. So if you're going for your GED, then in traveling from Leesburg, it's about 15 miles. That trip is an hour and a half long. And currently, the bus will drop off there, but the bus system does not pick up from Lake Tech. It picks up down at Ardice, which is about, the Tractor Supply plaza, which is about a mile. So in this heat, in this rain, you're talking about youth having to walk to get there to take a bus ride that could take them an hour and a half. So we've had kids stranded. This just weighs on them emotionally as they're trying to get their life together. And then there's demands that they're just not equipped to deal with. Our youth are, you were talking about, they're healthy. Our kids qualify for Medicaid until 26 right now under Obamacare, I think, and the revisions that they made to that, the kids that age out, our homeless unaccompanied youth do not. But the kids that age out, but a lot of the services just are non-existent even with that. So especially dental services. And if you've ever, you're talking about a kid who may have went the majority of his life with no dental care. So, our youth are at the age where your wisdom teeth often come in and have to be extracted. It's about $1,500 to have your wisdom teeth extracted. So, and we're just not finding that they have. Then we have mental health, and we reported that 69% of them are reporting having mental health issues. Well, I promise you, every youth that I work with has mental health issues. Being homeless, being separated from your family, many of them have experienced several deaths in their family, not only one. But what do you do when you can't find those get those mental health issues addressed? And those are just the simple ones. That's not including drug dependency or other factors, or some of them with the severe abuse, PTSD, RAD, or whatever that they may suffer from. We also find that we have a number of students with low development or that may need to be permanently on some kind of disability, but we don't have access to their records when they're younger. So it's very, very difficult to get them lined up with that care. And permanent supportive housing in Lake County is one of the things that we're lacking. But the services to get somebody diagnosed with that puts them in harm's way. So if you happen to be a single mother, there's waivers available to you to get your child daycare. The problem is that with those waivers also comes along a shortage of daycares, and a lot of the daycares can charge an excess fee of $50 a week. So if you're in one of your first jobs, typically those start off, minimum wage is, I don't even know, $8 an hour. And how do you afford a $50 a week daycare bill, in addition to rent and transportation and everything else? And then availability of having those services. You may not find one. So, and all of these are things that an 18-year-old faces We do, with the homeless unaccompanied youth, we may get a call at 17. And at 17, it's very unlikely that the state is going to take you in unless you fall under that where you can approve or prove abuse or neglect. So, and the kids will report, my parent kicked me out or whatever. And there's just not a lot of advantages to a youth there, but we do find that kids are 16 and 17 and on their own. So, and all these struggles that we mentioned are day-to-day struggles, but life still happens. So what happens when your baby's born with a birth defect, or your boyfriend beats you, or you have nobody with a car to get your driver's license? When you're handling these things on your own, these are things, when you go to get your driver's license and you're working on your permanent license, you have to have a car to drive. How do you do that? How do you, when you lose all your identification, how do you prove who you are? These are things that adults struggle with sometimes, but youth don't have. We've all had a lifetime to make connections and associates and whatever, but these kids are just starting out and they've been moved around so much. And this happens on their 18th birthday. They're going to age out on their 18th birthday. And though we have extended foster care, it's difficult to find placement. Placement may not be in your hometown, especially here in rural America and Lake County, how things exist. We're still a rural group. Some of the things that are available in our metropolitan areas, career source, dynamic career source, or develop goodwill programs are just not as readily available here. And, what do you do about that? So, these kids have never had jobs, behind in school, so don't know how to maintain a relationship because they've never really seen it. And they're having to figure out all these kind of things on their own. And then now we have COVID. So where all of us adults are still trying to figure out how do we make changes to our daily routine and do them safely? Well, our youth were the first ones to be laid off. And, so what do you do when you get laid off? And, everybody's like, oh, we have unemployment. Well, I'll tell you, they could not access unemployment. The phones weren't being answered. This is a lot of the first time that these kids were doing this stuff. What happens if you didn't get a stimulus check? We still have youth that didn't and probably never will. Some of the youth are only 18. So last year, they went by what happened last year. Last year, they were in the care of somebody else. Likely that person got their stimulus check. Some of them haven't, even though that they're older, they still haven't received it. We still work on that. But let's say they're even being housed by us, or they're housing themselves. What if you had a ticket and then you lose your job and you have no money? Then your ticket goes unpaid, then your license becomes suspended, then you lose your car, then you get more fees because your license has been suspended if you're driving or whatever. This actually happened. These are facts. What if you paid your rent and now there's some late cares fees, but you borrowed money or you left other things unpaid, and now there's aid for the rent or the electricity, but you paid that. It's the other things that you left unpaid, your car insurance. So, what does that look like? What if you were laid off and then your job's back? It's like there were a lot of layoffs in the beginning, but now we still have COVID and it's still reoccurring. What happens when your daycare closes? This is what's happening now. What if you're a single mom and the daycare is closed? How do you go to work? then you lose your job all over again. So, yeah, these are the things that we face. Aging out, they report that 20% will be become homeless in 2 years. 1 in 4 will be incarcerated in 2 years. Less than 3% will earn a high school diploma. So, these are the things that we're dealing with. Forward Paths was formed by a group of people mainly that worked in our dependency court system, a lot of guardian ad litems that really wanted to advocate for the child's best interest. And I can't think of a harder time than when you're, coming out of, becoming an adult, coming out of your childhood after experiencing abuse and neglect, and then trying to figure these things out. So, I think I've heard a lot from people saying, well, I just didn't know. But we have 4.2 million homeless youth. I mean, those are numbers. Those aren't the undocumented numbers. So I think for every, they do the point in time count, but it's not done correct. Point in time count is the count that the federal government goes out into the community and counts our truly homeless on one day out of the year. Those numbers are just not high enough. And somebody brought up homeless adults. The one thing that youth have to barter with is themselves. So, which puts them at a very high risk for things like human trafficking. And it does exist. I have seen it. I have seen people trying to talk our youth into prostituting themselves, and getting them involved in things, and it really puts them at risk. So it's, as adults, as citizens, it's time that we make these youth a priority. If we're not going to do anything about any other segment of homelessness, I think we should do something in regards to these youth at this age. So, excuse me. Does anybody have any questions?
We do have quite a number of questions that have come up on the chat, and I'll read a couple of them and see where it takes us, if that's all right with you, Denise.
Yes, thank you.
So how many youth do you work with yourself now? And do you ever work with little ones?
Okay.
Not sure what little ones
as
are.
Far as I pulled a HMIS report. HMIS is our homeless management information system. And it's the database that we use at Forward Paths, and trying to work with our COC, our Continuum of Care on Homelessness. We are currently working with 112 youth. So that could be anywhere from helping them.
Who is we? How many folks are you and your team? And
Okay. We're a mainly volunteer-run organization. Wow. Which really became interesting this year with COVID, because the majority of my volunteers are over 65. I have 2 paid. I myself am a volunteer. I have 2 paid case managers, and then 2 part-time. And the case managers work full-time with the youth. And then I have 2 part-time people in our office that work with me on our finances and our grants. So, and everything else is done by volunteers. Our office is at Morrison United Methodist Church on Main Street in Leesburg, and our office space and our expenses there, the electricity and that is paid by Morrison and donated in kind. And this past year, we were donated a large piece of land by the First United Methodist Church of Eustis. And that is 1 mile away from our tech school to help us address that transportation issue that we have in getting our kids to school. Now, I said those are youth, but we have 33 little ones. So why do we work with little ones? Because
So what are little ones? What's that?
little
definition?
ones are the children of our youth.
Okay.
So they belong to our single moms and dads. And we, in fact, did have 2 babies born last January, actually a year ago, last January 2019, with birth defects, one with Hirschsprung's and one with a cleft palate. So it's like life does not exempt you from other things because you're a homeless youth. We also lost 4 people connected with Forward Paths to death this year. We see, and one of them was one of our house moms, and the son that they were hosting had lost his mom almost 2 years to the day before that. So, life doesn't exempt you from other things because you're a homeless youth. You still get everything else that the rest of us get. Experiencing COVID also.
So you had talked about COVID as being the new challenge this year. How does that challenge present itself, and how has it forced your kids to face things differently?
I think sometimes adults forget, in their business lives that they're adjusting and they should be given an exception because they're dealing with COVID and whatever, but they're having to address everything and all the changes as we make them up, especially to the school system. It may be that there's a special uniform requirement or, something in adjusting to the safety measures needed for COVID. So they're having to do that. Our kids were the first to be laid off in our housing portion of the project. We have about 22 kids. 20 of them were laid off. One of them that wasn't laid off works for my husband, and the other one had just got a job. But now we're going on, and a lot of them have got jobs back for those, who got rehired, but their hours aren't the same because the businesses aren't doing the volume. They're figuring out how to do without them. So we have got lucky in a few. We just had a youth age out, I guess, exit out of our housing program because she got a better job. So, but it was like during that time when she was laid off, she worked at the movie theaters, and I'm not even sure, are they still open, So she had to kind of go out and find another job, and she's a college student. So she did, and she got a job at a car dealership. So now she's saved up enough money and has moved out. So for her, COVID brought a positive change, but for most of them, it brought more bills. And then what do? They cut off evictions, but the kids knew that they had to pay rent later on. So it doesn't do you any good. And they didn't know that there would be money to assist with that. So many of them went about things differently and paid their rent because they didn't want to be homeless. But we had, in addition to COVID, we had 2 of our houses sold because one of our landlords' wives became ill. Nothing to do with COVID, but it was time for him to make a change. So then we had to kind of figure out what we were, and they sold in a hurry in the midst of COVID. So
what kind of housing opportunities, or what kind of housing units and spaces do you have available, and how are they provided, and how do you get access to those?
Last year we were donated a piece of property that has 2 houses on them. So we own one of the houses now, and we are receiving CDBG funds to renovate the other one. So we have 3 youth housed in the one, and the other house that will use the CDBG to renovate, will house 4 youth. And then we plan to build 10 tiny homes in Eustis. So we have the site plan, and we'll be negotiating with Eustis on that. But other than that, we rent. And we're just in the process to shift. COVID changed things for us too. We had a set of 3 apartments that didn't have a washer and dryer. So we're shifting to houses now so that we can have that.
So how many total units are you running right now?
Let's see.
Rental and for ownership.
Well, we're kind of in the mix of crossing over, but we will have 3 houses that we rent in addition to the one that we own. And then we have 3 apartments, and one of those is in our name. And the other 2 are what I call our affordable housing project. I have a landlord that gives us a reduced amount of rent, and then I can place students in theirs, and those apartments are in the students' names, but he'll only do it if I place them.
Are they mixed market rate rentals? I mean, where they're around people who own or rent themselves?
They are.
Not in programs?
They are. And the thing about affordable housing is very limited in Lake County. I've only actually, other than our program and the landlord that kind of like did us a favor, I've only seen 2 youth get into that sliding scale.
The Section 8 voucher program?
Section 8 voucher the Section 8's been closed for years. So that, that kind of reduced rate rent doesn't exist for our youth. They can't qualify for it. It's not there. And that's the problem. And then even if they have money, if they have a job, who wants to rent to an 18-year-old or even a 20-year-old? Let's be honest. If you've got the option of renting to a 20-year-old or a 55-year-old, I would pick the 55-year-old. Let's be honest, because it's just a much more riskier venture. So we really work with our kids when they exit our program to kind of match them up. And I spend a lot of time talking to our landlords and that, trying to get them placed, but it's very difficult, Lake County, very difficult. We have housing for over 55 and all those parks and that. We need a park that's for under 25. We
Right.
stay up a little later. We're going to start a little later in the morning. We're going to be up night. Police are probably going to be called a little bit more often, but that's what.
So let's jump to a little different topic. Why don't foster parents make sure that the youth finishes school and gets a GED before they age out? What's happening there with foster parents?
Well, for one, a lot of teen placements are in group homes because we have a.
So there is no mentor, there is no foster parent, so to speak.
Well, you
It's
might
just
have
managed.
a mentor, but like I mentioned, my first guardian ad litem kid, she was moved 9 times. She wasn't being moved because of her behavior. She would be in a program and then the program would lose funding. So one program, and she might be moved outside the area. So just because she was like county case doesn't guarantee you're going to be housed in Lake County. She was housed in Seminole County. She was housed in Marion County. It's all in where you can find placement. But one time she was, and actually it happened more than once, she's in a program in a placement, they lose their funding and they may switch from housing girls to boys. It's all in what you can get the grants for, the funding for. So the one time there were 6 girls there and all 6 girls had to be moved. And so then you start, and you can move a kid about 3 times and then they're just going to stop adjusting. They're not going to make friends at school. And if you're not making friends and the guidance counselor's not giving you the warm fuzzies when you enter because she's overworked, then what happens? You just start shutting down. And then you're dealing with court and parents not making their visitation, and all these kids have very complicated lives going on outside of school, and then now we have COVID. So that's a whole, maybe we had kids working on their GED or their certificate programs, and then all of a sudden, oh, we're changing it. We're going to online schooling. So, it's all of this. So, and then foster parents, like adoptive parents, we have a lot of failed adoptions that we're dealing with. You may have set out, but you're talking about youth that bring a lot of baggage with them. And adoptive parents or foster parents have baggage too, and it doesn't always mesh.
So another question. Do you know if homeless youths are eligible for the Sadowski funds? Is there any help available through Sadowski? Are you aware of what that is?
No, I know what the Sadowski funds are, and I always try to research that, but I am not aware of the youth benefiting from the Sadowski funds.
Okay.
There's a
question came from Constance Albright. I don't know, Constance, did you want to add anything to that question? Okay. Let me unmute you, Constance. See if,
yeah.
There you go.
I'm not that familiar with the Sadowski funds either. I lobbied the legislature a couple of years, last year actually, about them. The funds are siphoned off every year for everybody's little slushy fund to make the folks back home feel good. But now I think they're getting serious. There's so much homelessness in the state. But I thought the kids would be eligible for, or you, or Forward Paths would be eligible for one of your houses or
if
something.
I'm right, we got the Sadowski funds back in February, but that was the first funds cut in after COVID. So those were the first, and I said cut, they took the Sadowski funds to help pay for the COVID expenses. And that's basically what's happened with the Sadowski funds. So
yet the governor returned $600 million to large corporations who had overpaid their sales tax, right in the middle of COVID,
And the governor has been saying how important mental health services are, but yet we have a 3%. And I think it was a 6% until some of those funds got mixed back. So we have a 3% reduction. And I looked for what number Florida is now in mental health. We were 50th.
I've heard that you're 50th, 49th or 50th.
We're only ahead of Puerto Rico. And I heard there was a chance that we may not be ahead of Puerto Rico coming up. So this is where we're at. And so in regards to my youth, they are non-existent. My husband, there's an article about him today in the Daily Commercial, but he's running for city commission. But he ran the Lifestream pharmacy, inpatient pharmacy for 21 years. So I'm familiar with who the doctors and who the people are to work there, and I cannot get my kids services. So, and I promise you, every single youth that I work with needs mental health services, and they basically are non-existent. We hired a part-time pharmacist, Maggie Dank Miller runs Camp Challenge, and she is working with us part-time, paid with unencumbered funds because we needed them so badly. So for every dollar I spend somewhere else, that's less I can spend on housing or housing assistance or whatever. But it was just vital to us. And before COVID, we were working to try to get Medicaid to pay for that. Well, this is not the time to be applying, it's just very difficult. But in fact, our mental health budget and Sadowski funds, I don't think there's any hope that we're going to get. I was hoping for them for affordable housing, but.
If we had expanded Medicaid, would the kids, would there be more mental health services available?
No, I don't think so.
You
They
don't think so?
They
Okay, I was just wondering.
there's not enough money to pay the providers, to pay the working staff. So they struggle with finding the psychiatrist or the therapist or whatever. And there's just areas that will pay them more money, other states that will pay them more.
Okay, That's,
So,
I can understand, you know, you understand. Well, thank you.
thank you.
Thank you. Pat Beerhalter, I noticed that you also piggybacked on this question. I didn't know if you had anything else you wanted to ask or add.
No, I don't. Every time I see Denise, I always ask her that same question in hopes that there's a different answer.
I'll keep looking for it, and I keep thinking maybe there's something I don't know about, or I'm going to discover something, and hey, we should have been doing this all along. But I work pretty closely with Kids Central. Kids Central is our CBC, our community-based care agency that runs foster care and adoption. So we have a pretty good relationship now with independent living, and we share the same frustrations.
Thank you. Carol Armel, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I had put a question in chat and it relates to this mental health issue. What's the rate of suicide among your kids?
Oh, you
'Cause I know it's high.
I don't know about the rate of suicide or attempts, but we did have a youth commit suicide. It was a couple years ago, and oddly, we had kind of we hadn't had a youth threaten, other than a serious threat. But in that week, we had 4. And if you would have asked me about this youth, I would not have top 10. But he got in an argument with his girlfriend during graduation time, which I think there is a high rate now that I know more. And we were struggling with the school, and I was not happy. But his girlfriend was going to graduate, and he wasn't. They got in an argument, and I think people were trying to divide them or separate them. And he had bought a car, and he lived with a host family, and I didn't even know yet. He had it 3 days, and he drove the car into a tree going 80 miles an hour. So it was a horrific accident. They had a young child. He was 19. So I worry every day, and that's why we hired Maggie. And she's been a godsend, because it's like a lot of people think you've had a bad day at work. Having to commit suicide that you had no idea was in that kind of situation or at that kind of risk at the time is a bad day. And we hope never to have that repeated again.
I just know that the rate of suicide is going up dramatically in that, I think 15 to 25.
Right. Well, they had, it's funny because it's not funny, but they had, before there was like 4 or 5 suicides in South Lake. And the young gentleman went to Burry's, and they said they don't have a problem with it, and kind of like, we're just going to kind of do some like risk assessment, whatever. And then it happened. So I went, it didn't change. It didn't change. You know, we had a number of suicides at that time in Lake County, and it didn't change anything. So our youth simply are not a priority. And if somebody's saying, oh, yes, they are, I am telling you, they clearly are not. So,
Are you offered any pro bono services from health professionals? Are you connected in any way to the medical community?
Yeah, we have, but they come in spurts, and typically I look for emergencies. So if I have an emergency, I'll go and put a Band-Aid on it. That's what that's the best we can do right now. with our budget, with our, we are working to kind of shift more to services. But one of the first things we decided to tackle was homelessness, because how do you work on your education or your job skills or having your child be stable if you don't have a home? If you can't lay your head down and be stable in your daily life, how can you do anything else? So that's one of the first things that we decided to address. Now, there's transportation, there's mental health, there's education, there's mentoring and job skills. All those things need to be addressed. But one of the things that we decided, and it's just because we had such a difficult time finding those youth homes, even when there was money involved, even when there was, there was a budget to work with. That didn't even address all the times there wasn't any money. So that's, right or wrong, that's what we decided to do.
Just a comment. Years ago, I served on a board of directors for a community development agency at county level, and for 10 years was on that group. One of the things that worked is it was an incredible high-powered group of volunteer businessmen and governmental employees and lawyers and things that were behind it. But they were volunteers. But it generated connections to the federal, state, and local programs that existed that had not been coordinated or linked in any way. And when
we have a lot of that, like not linking to something that we could possibly link to. And before COVID, there were some really good meetings starting with a lot of the agencies that should have been working with them.
And organizing from what body? Where was it generating from?
The juvenile justice system, organizing with mental health, and starting on a plan involving homelessness and all that. But it's like a lot of that came to a halt in March.
Yeah.
Our round table discussions. And for one, we've done everything we could just to keep our youth stable. We had to let a lot of our volunteers go. They came back to me, but it's like, you don't risk one group to save another. So it's like, we got to shut our office down to so many people. I kept my staff and we worked with the youth, but there wasn't the buzz of volunteers that we had, and we still are not back to that. We're in a more controlled environment now. Some of it's working out. Zoom, our meetings with the Zoom are going well, but it's just a change in the way we do everything.
Is there a county community development entity that's trying to coordinate things? Or is it just Leesburg? And I know Leesburg has little.
No, there were some county meetings going on. I'm not aware of them picking back up since COVID.
Okay. You almost have to imagine, and I'm going to let Lois jump in here. I see her hand waving. Go ahead, Lois. Unmute.
Maybe.
Can you unmute? There you go.
I think we just did. Hi, Debbie. Debbie and I have known each other since she had begun this through our Quilting Sisters Guild. And I am concerned about you personally. You have put an awful lot on your plate. And sometimes that can be a very lonely place to be, especially when there is such a dire need that you're trying to fill. And I wish you well. And I would tell you, you're not as alone as you might feel. We're not always right there because we can't be, but you're in our hearts. And one of the other things that I wanted to know, I know how much Quilting Sisters has been a small support to you. Are you getting support from other nonprofit agencies? That's question one. And question two, as a Unitarian church, how can we be of very practical assistance, whether that's politically, whether that's things I don't even know that we could be doing.
I
And
did.
Michelle, and before we let you answer, Michelle sends her love. She's moved, and we'll chat later and we'll catch up with her.
Thank you. Thank you. As Lois mentioned, we've known each other for some time now, and the Quilting Sisters are an amazing group of women, such talented people, and been a great support. We do receive a lot of support, and just so everybody knows, when it comes to matching this year to last year, we are on a track for fundraising, which is amazing in itself, because my heart about stopped in March. But we're in a good position. Where we're behind is in August, we normally do a fundraiser. It's a luncheon. And it's more, I say fundraiser, the purpose of it, the reason we started it was to kind of inform the community who we were and what we were doing. Well, this year we had plans to begin our tiny house development. So we were going to roll out with that. And of course, because of COVID, we couldn't do that. So we had hoped to start a capital campaign, because our hope is to build 10, and they're around 700 square feet, tiny homes in Eustis, so that our youth can get to school. When we started off in Leesburg, there was no active GED program. There is now at the Resource Center. But there's been times throughout the last 7-8 years where there hasn't been. And so we've had to just work with our mentors. And those classes are just starting up again. So we're in a little time of reinvention, and where patience is required. I would say from your congregation, what you can do is continue to preach the message. I think love is the only answer, right? I think right now that's the thing our youth need to hear universally, is, don't be pulled into the hate, into the arguments, into the disagreements, and know, they need to know more people are with them, so that they can get over their youth and their experiences and get their education. So I'm really hoping we see more innovative educational opportunities come about. And we'll see what the next year or so brings. Let's just get us through the fall and COVID.
Diana K. Reed. Unmute. Unmute yourself, Diana. There you go.
There, finally. I couldn't find myself. I wanted to know if your organization is a 501c3, and maybe we could advertise that somehow for contributions.
Absolutely. Our organization is a 501c3. Yes. And we run on, somebody asked about civic groups. All of our funds, minus a small grant we got from the county, $5,000 last year. All of our funds come from civic groups and private. They can be small family trusts or private donations from individuals.
I would suggest we find some written information about how to contribute to this effort.
Well, we have a website and a Facebook. Our Facebook is more day-to-day things, and our website is more overall plan. This is what we're about. You'll see on Facebook, like we needed a freezer. We do housing. We have therapy. We have a food pantry. We do mentoring. I mean, anything that a youth might need, we're trying to address, because they're all individuals. They all need something different. So on Facebook, you'll see this request, hey, we need cleaning supplies.
I
Hey,
think you need to put that on your website as well. But
it's a
people
lot.
are not gonna look at two places.
Well, it's a
And-
lot.
And can we do to spread the word?
Well, it's a lot to maintain. And right now, like I said, we're mainly a volunteer organization. So right now we're doing the best we can do. So our day-to-day needs are expressed typically on Facebook or on one-to-one or communicating with our civic groups. And our overall plan is on our website. So, but you can get our hours and our location and that from both. And we also have brochures.
You have what?
Brochures.
Oh, brochure, okay.
So
Thank you so much. Thank you, Denise. We're coming up on 8 o'clock, and I wanted to just get 2 more questions in,
Okay.
and then we'll wrap up. The first one is kind of coming back to your own experience. What's the hardest misconceptions that you face as the executive director of forwardpaths.org?
The hardest misconception is that we can take a youth in 90 days and turn their life completely around. And I think especially when it comes to government or when we're designing our program, to think that we can turn somebody's life around in 90 days and get them educated where they didn't get educated in 18 years and get them the things that they need to go on to be successful, it is just unrealistic expectation. We've had some of our youth in our program for 3 years, but when we get them and they're in high school and needing all that, it takes several years to get somebody the skills that they need to go on and lead an independent, successful life. So we don't just cut out, it's like you're still working with them, we don't just cut them out after 90 days. So
last question for you. What's next for Forward Paths? Where is your immediate priority action?
We are waiting to get our contract back from the county, and we will begin the bidding process on our renovation. And we hope soon, we have the site plan for our 10 tiny homes. So we will be going to Eustis. We're waiting for the house plans to come back from the designer, and we will be going to Eustis to negotiate on building those. It's a very exciting time for us, especially considering that we kind of got off track with COVID. To think that we could possibly consider doing this after the news and the decisions we had to make in March is really encouraging. So we're preparing for the fall. We know COVID's going to be involved with us still in the fall again as the numbers start to rise again, and we're expecting that. But we have decided to move on, and I think we have a solid chance of that happening. So
Fantastic.
Our goal is to get those kids educated and to get them close enough to where they can reasonably get to school and minimize some of the stresses that they have to deal with. And we're really looking forward to it.
So when you're successful with the permits and getting the new small houses built, combined with your existing rentals and ownership, how many total units by the end of 21 do you think you'll have?
We will reduce our rentals because that's going to add about 28. That's going to be housing for about 28. And so we will always keep some housing in Leesburg because the majority of our youth come from South Lake and Leesburg. So when we get a youth in high school, we like to keep them at their home school. And because of that, we will always have some housing, and we plan to keep our office in Leesburg. But in moving to Eustis, the majority of our kids need to start their education with either their GED or a certificate program to help them earn more money. So the majority of our housing then will shift from Leesburg to Eustis. So, and then our funds will be directed more services because we'll own those. So that's
Thank you so much. It's an incredibly exciting time, and I'm just delighted to have been able to get exposed to these efforts tonight for the first time.
Thank you.
You're doing amazing work, and I know you have our hearts behind you, but now you have some very big brain power behind you as well. There's a lot of folks in this group tonight,
Anybody
I'm
has
sure.
a suggestion, I'd love to hear it, you know. So keep on with the questions and keep on with the suggestions. Feel free to call me and keep spreading that love is the only answer.
Thank you so much. I posted the website in the chat room tonight for people to pull and copy if they'd like to take a look. It's forwardpaths.org, and that's forward. Be careful not, we found out earlier today that our happy Android and Google autocorrect usually changes the spelling on that. So it's F-O-R-W-A-R-D, forward, P-A-T-H-S. Make sure to put the S on the end.
That's correct.
.org, O-R-G. And you'll find all kinds of amazing things going on at that website, which is going to get even better. So thank you all. Russ, I'm going to hand it back to you to close up tonight.
Thanks, Kristen. And thank you, Denise, for opening our eyes. I know all of us are awed by your ambition and what you're taking on. And we wish you the best with it and hope that we can help you in some way.
Thank you.
So again, thank you so much. And I'd also like to thank all of you who attended this talk and who gave us questions, sent in questions through chat or directly. It's inspiring to see how interested people are in this county in social justice issues. And I also need to, once again, extend my gratitude to Jane Hepting, who is absolutely tireless in putting this series together. And also to Kristen, who continues to ask excellent questions, and to Val Rosado and the technical team, who always work hard to master the challenges of making technology work for us. Please join us 2 weeks from tonight when our speaker will be former Lake Sentinel columnist Lauren Ritchie, speaking on how do we keep Lake County government responsible. Until then, thank you for coming, and let's keep the light of social justice and healthy environment burning. For now, I will extinguish our chalice and say good night. Stay informed, side with love, and stay well. Good night.